Welcome to R&R Living Life. In this episode, Rick and I continue exploring Kalbarri before making our way to Hamelin Pool. Today we made our way south of Kalbarri to the coastal cliffs, stopping first at Shell House and Grandstand Rock Gorge, one of three lookout spots along the National Park South Access Road. Shell House and Grandstand are where fishermen at sea thought they could see a shell-shaped house on the side of the cliff, hence the name. From the lookout we had stunning views of the dramatic terraced coastal cliffs and the features that have been sculptured into them by the wind and the continual pounding of the Indian Ocean over millions of years, having sometimes claimed massive chunks of the soft limestone coast, leaving remnant cliff formations. Most of the coastline is limestone, but here the limestone has weathered, exposing the red iron-rich sandstone. The banding of different layers of coloured sandstone was incredible, even though we were seeing it early in the morning. From Shell House and Grandstand, we made our way further along the coast, where we took a scenic boardwalk along the top of the coastal cliffs, stopping at several designated viewpoints along the way. Located at the southern end of the Kalbarri National Park's coastal cliffs, Island Rock and Natural Bridge date back to over 400 million years and towering up to 100 metres above the crashing waves of the Indian Ocean. These sprawling geological formations offer a dramatic contrast between the land and the sea, and is home to some of the most scenic lookouts in this region. Island Rock is a lone solitary sea stack of weathered sandstone standing as a guard, having yielded to the forces of the ocean. It was once part of the mainland, but over millions of years powerful waves eroded the softer rock around it, leaving behind its distinctive formation, highlighting how the ocean has sculptured it by the fracturing and erosion of the cliffs. This amazing precarious rock formation stands against the ocean backdrop as a solitary reminder of the forces of the ocean, reminiscent of the 12 Apostles. On our return walk along the boardwalk, we could see clearly the Natural Bridge, a fully formed limestone rock bridge still attached to the coastline, formed by the relentless action of the sea, wind and salt spray pounding against the cliffs. The forces of nature here are on full display, as the limestone cliffs bear the marks of millennia of coastal erosion. The cliffs also hold geological significance with fossils of ancient marine life that can be found embedded in the rock, providing insight into the prehistoric environments that once existed here. The steep cliffs along this stretch of the coastal cliffs are a layered rock made of 480 million year old Tambalagudda sandstone that was deposited as layers of sand and silt by rivers and on tidal flats. The rubbly white rocks that form the upper part of these cliffs are made of a much younger Tamala limestone. This was deposited during the last 2 million years as wind-blown sand dunes that were later converted to limestone. The coastline is very jagged with vertical points and fractures within the rock that have probably controlled its irregular shape. On our walk along the boardwalk from Island Rock to Natural Bridge and return, just over 1.5 kilometres, there were some sections that were very close to the cliff edge, but did offer spectacular views, breathtaking and unbeatable scenery. The broad walk was set nicely above the natural heathland and followed the curve of the cliffs, where we had amazing views of the waves rolling in from the Indian Ocean. We then returned to Gidget and had a late morning tea before going to find the emus that roamed around people's backyards. The large mob with a male and about 15 young were just cruising around looking for something to eat. We did find a couple of kangaroos resting in the shade as well. After lunch we went into Kalbarri to IGA to pick up groceries ready for the next leg of our adventure. That afternoon we walked down to Red Bluff Beach, where the white sandy beach contrasted with the rust-red cliffs, and yes, it did create a spectacular sunset. Before the sun began to dip below the horizon, I was fascinated by the patterns created in the rocks. Erosion at work by Mother Nature over millions of years, sculpturing these stunning landscapes. She sure can create some amazing structures and formations. The layers of the cliff edge were deep horizontal bands of multicoloured sands that were deposited in layers millions of years ago, dropped on what was once tidal flats, with the softer rocks where the wave action sculptured the edges. The geology of it all was astonishing. We then spent quite a lot of time exploring the rock pools, checking out the hundreds of crabs under the rock ledges along the edge of the ocean, and the small shells in the pools. It was interesting to watch as they moved in and out from under the gaps, and the tide rolled in, and as I moved closer, how quickly they disappeared back under the ledge. For a land lover like me, I was really fascinated by the behaviour of these small creatures. Where we were at the bottom of Red Bluff, it appeared to be a rocky ledge that hugged the edge of the ocean. The rock face here was also very interesting, and to top it off with the sunset highlighting the rich red colour, I found it a very rewarding afternoon, just wandering around. From Bluff Point, we continued watching the sun as it set below the Indian Ocean. What a wonderful afternoon, with a stunning sunset to boot. Along this coastline, the Indian Ocean is home to a variety of birds, marine mammals, fish and invertebrates, with most living below the waves. Sometimes we could see schools of fish slowly moving through the water, but were not lucky enough to see any humpback whales travelling north, though other travellers we had talked to had been lucky enough to see the first of these marine travellers. Coastal plants have adapted to this often windswept, sunburnt and salt-sprayed environment by adapting small leathery and prickly leaves that reduce moisture loss as well as sun and salt damage. The flowers are mostly in clusters with reduced petals to also survive the conditions. The following day we left Kalbarri early, passing the pelicans as they came for their feed on the foreshore, and made our way along Kalbarri Road through Kalbarri National Park to the Northwest Coast Highway, where we stopped to check both the boat and Gidget. We passed through Galena Nature Reserve and crossed Galena Bridge over the Murchison River. Our travels this morning were through some stunning countryside. Over every rise there was something new to look at or talk about. National parks gave way to farming lands or long straight stretches of road. Then there would be salt lakes or breakaways in the hillside. The changing vegetation was also interesting, and Rick and I had lots to talk about as we continued on our travels. In the area we were travelling through, mixed farming enterprises seemed to be the way to go. Broadacre agriculture being the predominant industry, with internationally recognised biodiversity hotspots, must create some struggles, especially with soil conditions, wind erosion, soil salinity and acidity, lack of reliable water and the push to restore habitats to maintain unique flora and fauna. Being a farmer is never easy, but I am sure they would not change it. The Galena area is a historic mining area which includes the Geraldine mine, where ticket of leave and convict men from the Lytton depot worked side by side. The mine was the first productive European mining operation in Western Australia, opened in 1849, with also the first smelter being built there. In August 1926, a timber bridge across the Murchison River was built, with the recent Galena Bridge being constructed in August 1983, standing 12 metres above the riverbed. There is a large rest area on both banks of the Murchison River. We had over 300 kilometres to go today to make it to Hamelin Pool, with much of the trip through small localities and pastoral stations and passed two roadhouses. It was amazing country, so vibrant looking, that rich red soil, then sand swales covered in vegetation, not to mention the long stretches of highway. I was intrigued by the boats we passed, certainly not your ordinary tinny. The boat and vehicle costing as much as Gidget and the boat, I would hazard a guess. We passed Uradi Reserve, formerly a pastoral station, now a 30,050 hectare Bush Heritage of Australia area, with the aim of protecting biodiversity and revegetating cleared areas. It is one of only 34 biodiversity hotspots recognised globally, with a diverse range of more than 500 native plant species. Then through the pastoral properties of Nirran and Meadow in the southern Murchison in the Shire of Shark Bay, totalling approximately 155,000 hectares, with the western boundary just 50 kilometres from the Indian Ocean. The two properties straddle the Northwest Coastal Highway and are run as a joint rangeland enterprise. We stopped and stretched our legs at the Billabong Roadhouse, located halfway between Geraldton and Carnarvon, and was established in 1962 when the highway was merely a dirt track. What a busy roadhouse with many trucks, vehicles, cars and caravan combinations, as well as car and boats refuelling. So needed in the area, being approximately 200 kilometres from Kalbarri, just over 180 kilometres from Northampton and 245 kilometres from Carnarvon. I know that doesn't sound far, but long stretches with very little to see other than the countryside can be very tiring when you are driving. We are certainly enjoying the scenery, so vastly different to what we have been used to. From the Billabong Roadhouse, the country became undulating ridges before passing the Coburn Mineral Sands project that commenced operation in late 2022. On reaching the Overland Roadhouse, we refueled and filled the jerry cans as we were planning to do some four-wheel driving out to Steep Point. Hamelin Pool, also known as Flagpole Landing in the early 1900s, is also home to an old telegraph station built in 1884, originally named Flint Cliff Telegraph Station, as part of the communication line between Perth and Roebourne, and was a small isolated port servicing pastoral stations in the area, with cargo vessels bringing supplies to and shipping wool from surrounding stations when there was no roads connecting Shark Bay to other areas of Western Australia. The telegraph station played a vital role in Western Australia's communication system until the public telex system signified its demise in the late 1950s, with the original building, now a museum, housing many artefacts. Hamelin Pool is a large body of water between the west coast of mainland Australia and Nanga Peninsula, and is a 127,000 hectare marine park, part of the Shark Bay World Heritage Area. At first glance, the Hamelin Pool seems like an unremarkable rocky beach, but it is far from it. The beach itself was made up of a shell called the Hamelin cockle, so abundant at Hamelin Pool that it compressed into a form of sedimentary mass. The rock we could see in the water was slightly odd-looking and were not rocks at all, but are called marine stromatolites. These extremely rare and super old rock-like structures are also called living fossils, the oldest living landforms on the planet, and have been at Hamelin Pool for 3.5 billion years. The high concentration of salt-to-water ratio results in an ideal environment for the stromatolites to grow, as it inhibits the other marine life which would normally feed on the bacteria living in the environment. The microbial mats are a diverse and complex ecosystem of communities of microscopic life forms with different communities supporting each other as they use different elements and create different products. Fueled by sunlight, a community of cyanobacteria converts carbon dioxide into organic carbon and free oxygen. Under and alongside the cyanobacteria, another community uses the carbon and oxygen to create products for a community of fermenters. This community makes small products that are used by yet another community, and so it continues. These microbial mats have been around for over 3 billion years, more than 75% of the Earth's geologic history. Over the last 2 billion years, cyanobacteria in microbial mats have influenced evolution by breathing oxygen into the atmosphere. In this hypersaline water, the Phragm crocle tends to be much smaller than the same species in regular seawater. There are so many here that the shells pile up, compacting and cementing into a soft limestone rock. We checked out the old quarry where the solid sedimentary mass had been cut into blocks and used in some of Shark Bay's historic buildings, and the lone grave of Thomas Carmody, aged 8 months, believed to have died from typhoid or cholera, an indication of the isolation and difficulties faced by early travellers and settlers in the district. Hamelin Pool is internationally famous as one of only 2 places on the planet where these living fossils exist and can give us a glimpse into how the planet looked billions of years ago. Stromatolites grow successfully and undisturbed at Hamelin Pool, where the seawater is twice as salty as usual seawater, due to a bar across the entrance of the bay. The hypersalinity is caused by a restriction of water flow into and out of the bay due to a sandbar called the floor sill that runs from the mainland of Australia across to Perrin Peninsula. It was such an interesting area to explore. Sadly, the boardwalk was still out of commission, having been damaged by a cyclone. I have included only a very small part of what I have learnt of this area. There is always something new to learn, and I have probably left out a lot of information that others might have found relevant or interesting. Once again, I have had to cut a lot of my research, just like my photos. I will leave this episode as Rick and I enjoy the sunset over Hamelin Pool from the ridge behind the caravan park. Again, we were surprised by the changing colours of the sunset. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Give us a thumbs up if you did. Join us next time as we explore Steep Point, the most westerly point on mainland Australia. Take care and stay safe. Cheers for now. Rick and Rosemary. R&R, living life.